Hello and a very warm welcome to you. It's now time for Africa News and here are our headlines. Gunfire rings out across the capital of Central African Republic as crowds call for the resignation of the country's president. A second day of violence in Bangui saw 2 protesters killed by peacekeeping troops. A regional leader and 2 policemen killed in northern Nigeria. State authorities point the finger of blame at Boko Haram. We'll be getting the latest from our correspondent Katerina Vitozzi in Abuja in just a few minutes. And Ivory Coast plays host to Africa's first ever international chocolate competition, one that is a question of particular pride for the home team. As the world's biggest cocoa producer, they are feeling the heat. While calling for the interim President Catherine Samba Panza to step down, angry crowds took to the streets of the capital of the Central African Republic for a second day of violent protests on Friday. 2 people were shot dead by peacekeepers, and the demonstrators also wanted those troops to leave, accusing them of favouring Muslims over the city's majority Christians.
Tensions remain high in Bangui. Thousands of protesters were in the streets of the capital of the Central African Republic 2 days after 17 people were killed in an attack against a church. The president describes the attack as a terrorist act, but the protesters blamed the Muslim community in the Kilometre 5 neighbourhood.
All militias must be disarmed. Kilometre 5 is close to here and we can't disarm it. Why not? Why is the 2127 resolution not applied?
There's anger against the United Nations peacekeepers, but particularly against the African Union's Burundian contingent, accused of allowing attacks against Christians.
We want the immediate departure of Burundian forces in the shortest space of time. We want the liberation of Kilometre 5 so that our mothers, sons and fathers can go about their business normally.
The protest turned into a confrontation between the crowd and African troops. Burundian soldiers that came under attack shot at the protesters.
We are here with women and children. We are unarmed. Burundian troops have killed 5 people. We were at the UN offices explaining things and they shot at us. Is that the way to respond? Central African Republic is for Central Africans.
According to reliable sources, 2 people were killed and a number of wounded were taken to Bangui's hospital. French and African forces issued a warning to Central African civilians. International troops threaten to use more force if the population interferes or opposes military operations.
Boko Haram and the Islamist militants behind the kidnapping of over 200 schoolgirls in mid-April are thought to have struck again in northern Nigeria. Gunmen attacked the convoy of local leaders who were attending a funeral, killing 1 and 2 policemen travelling with them. State authorities are pointing the finger of blame directly at Boko Haram. Well, joining us now from the capital of Nigeria, Abuja, to tell us more is our correspondent Katerina Vitozzi. Katerina, can you tell us more about what exactly happened in the north this Friday?
Yes, absolutely. As you say, in the north, more specifically the northeast in Borno State, these 3 local emirs, just to explain to those at home that an emir is essentially a traditional local village leader, something equivocal to a town mayor perhaps. 3 of them were travelling together in the same vehicle within a police escort, travelling to the funeral of another local emir, not far, about 30 kilometres from their departure point. They were shot at by gunmen suspected to be Boko Haram gunmen at around 9 o'clock on Friday morning. Now, all 3 emirs got out of the vehicle trying to escape and hide in the dense bushland that surrounds much of that area. One of them was shot and died of his wounds. That's the emir from the Gwoza district. 2 others successfully did hide, and in fact, for some time, security sources in Borno State thought that they had in fact been kidnapped. In fact, they were just hiding, waiting for these suspected Boko Haram gunmen to leave the area so that they could come back to safely. Sadly, 2 other policemen who were travelling and guarding that escort also did lose their lives.
Now, briefly, Katerina, northern Nigeria has been under a state of emergency for a year already as Boko Haram has been upping its attacks, if you like. According to one news agency, 500 people have been killed there since mid-April. Clearly a difficult place to live. Is there any help getting to the people there?
Well, yes, there has actually been a meeting of aid agencies in Abuja trying to work out what sort of humanitarian response can be gathered and what aid can be given to these communities, specifically looking at the Chibok community at the moment, that area, that town where 200 schoolgirls were kidnapped mid-April, looking at the big gaps that exist there in terms of education provisions, but also that there's a real lack of psychological support, not only for those girls who managed to escape in the early weeks, but also for the families of those girls and also for the families of the girls that still remain in captivity. So aid agencies have been looking at how they can galvanise psychological support. There's a UN special envoy expected in Abuja sometime next week to see how much money can be released and to be channeled through UN partners to really get it to the Chibok community, but also the communities across northeast Nigeria, where there's an estimated 250,000 internally displaced people needing food aid, needing shelter, and basic things like access to healthcare and clean water.
Okay, Katrina Vitozzi in Abuja, thank you indeed for joining us. Well, since the schoolgirl's abduction, there has been increased protests, of course, in Nigeria, calling on the country's security forces to do more. Across in Liberia, people there are also getting fed up with their police, saying they actually fear them rather than turn to them for help, and accuse them of corruption and stealing. Julia Seeger has the story.
The waterside market of Monrovia is closing up, and street vendors are busy trying to lure some last customers. Their biggest fear isn't being robbed by shoplifters, but rather that police officers could steal their goods.
Sometimes when they take your market, before you reach there, they are taking everything from there. Someone they can steal half of your market.
Liberia is still recovering from a brutal civil war that ended in 2003. Since then, the national police has struggled to provide security for most of the country because of a lack of adequate supplies. Security forces are also often accused of corruption. They earn about $150 a month. And according to Transparency International, 77% of Liberians have already bribed an officer, an issue that the chief of police has tried to tackle.
We have appealed to the public to stop getting involved with giving police money, even if they ask.
Police stations are falling in ruins. Electricity and water are scarce, and officers don't even have a computer, so reports are handwritten. There are only 5,000 officers across the country to ensure the security of over 3.5 million people.
Uniform, officers need uniform, the new batons, the new handcuffs, and all the accessories to make the police job effective.
The UN mission in Liberia started to reform and train the police 10 years ago when the country's civil war ended. With the program expected to end in just a couple of months, the national police will soon be on its own to maintain security across the country.
Well, let's take a very quick look now at some other news in brief. A protester is killed in Malawi as people and police clash in demonstrations demanding a recount in the country's presidential polls. The demonstrators say the ballot was rigged. Results have yet to be announced. It's thought that President Joyce Banda has lost. She and her party have been calling for the ballot to be declared null and void. And 2 aid workers have been killed in Mali after the car in which they were travelling hit an improvised explosive device just 100 kilometres outside of Timbuktu in the north of the country. They were both from the Norwegian Council of Refugees and had been handing out vital necessities to refugees recently returned to the region. Let's turn now to a lighter topic and go to the world's largest producer of cocoa for a very sweet story. Ivory Coast is hosting an international chocolate competition with 9 countries fighting it out for the title of Master Chocolatier. The home team is feeling the pressure, as our reporters who got tasting for us find out.
Stirred again and again. This chocolate is melted, shaped and perfected. All the chocolate makers here are working under intense pressure. For the team from Ivory Coast, the contest has a personal flavour.
It's really difficult because Ivory Coast is the home of cocoa, the world's largest producer. And today we're hosting and welcoming the whole of Africa here, so we're under a lot of pressure. We have to show what we've got and prove Ivory Coast's place in the world cocoa market.
This contest is the first of its kind. African chocolate making is in its infancy. Those here are chocolate pioneers.
We grow cocoa, but we don't know what to do with it. We should be the best chocolate makers in the world with all this cocoa.
Until now, cocoa from Africa's cocoa-growing nations has been processed abroad. There's the potential, therefore, for a whole industry to develop.
You can see the paradox. Even the chocolate for this competition had to come from France. It came by freight the morning of the contest, and we really hope that will change so that the chocolate will go from here to France, not the other way around.
Industry experts here are convinced chocolate processing is the future. Currently, a bar of chocolate in Ivory Coast costs the same as a kilogram of beans. It's hoped it could soon be more available and cheaper for all to enjoy.
And actually, the results of that competition have just come in. Tunisia took the top prize, with Ivory Coast coming second and Burkina Faso taking third place. Well, I have to say, I would happily eat any of those offerings. That brings us, however, to the end of this edition of Africa News, but do stay tuned to international headlines after the break.
In 1988, Lernacken, the second largest city in Soviet Armenia, is razed to the ground by a devastating earthquake. 25 years later, Gyumri, as the town is now called, is part of independent Armenia, while its hastily rebuilt housing has become a shanty town. Over half the population is out of work, but the city is rising from the rubble and hopes to live on. Lernacken Revisited on France 24 and France24.com.